Welcome, Laura. We haven't got you on a big. Can you say something? Then we should get you.
Hello. Hi.
Yeah. I think I've got you on. Let me just. Yeah, that's it. I've got you big. So, welcome, Laura. Laura is from her Grey Wolf studio in Glasgow. And Laura Aldridge studied at Wimbledon painting and then went on to do her MFA at Glasgow School of Art. She talks about her practice as being a kind of collage between kind of different media, photography, textile, incorporated into a sculptural practice. She's also part of the collective km.com, which is supported by ArtLink. Recent shows include No Math Method at Kunsthalle Stavanger and Curfew Gallery Edinburgh, and also at Copley Asner in Glasgow. Over to James. I'll just introduce James now. So James, can you say something and then you'll come on? You'll come on.
Can you hear me?
I can see you. Say a bit. That's it. There. Welcome, James. This is James Rigler, who's speaking from his home in Glasgow. So thank you very much, James. I'll just do a brief intro to you. James Rigler studied 3D craft at the University of Brighton and completed his MA at the Royal College of Art in London. He went on to work for the architectural terracotta company Lands and also completed a residency at the V&A in London. He works predominantly in ceramic and was recently commissioned to do a kind of installation for the newly renovated, reopened Aberdeen Art Gallery. And he has a studio at the Glasgow Sculptural Studio in Glasgow, of course. So welcome to you both. And I'm just going to kick off about how you started to collaborate, because both Laura and James have their own practice. So they work very distinctly on their own, have exhibitions, travel the world, explore their own practice. But a couple of years, you decided to bring yourself together and start collaborating. Can you tell me how it all began?
Well, we've been, I guess we've sort of been in each other's orbit for about 8 or 9 years, really. And we've worked together on different things, but more me maybe asking James to make something for me and not with me. And I guess the exhibition in London was the first time we've officially kind of collaborated together and sort of in equal measures, I think. Do you see that?
Yeah, and did you feel, were you looking for a collaborator at any point? James was in your orbit, were you thinking that actually it can be very solitary working on your own as an artist? Were you kind of on the lookout for somebody to collaborate with, and you thought, oh, James is somebody that I admire but has a slightly different discipline to my own?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always looking for ways to get into James's studio, or to like just be in his company, or to, you know, there's many occasions where James has helped me make, you know, he's taught me or shown me something, or, you know, he might call me with a question about something. So I'm always happy to, you know, to be in James's company. But the particular opportunity was something that I was invited to apply, and I didn't feel it was something I would get a lot out of working on my own. I think there's some exhibitions where you kind of have a sense of, you know, whether it's right for you working on your own or whether you want to kind of work with someone else. And I felt there were a lot of kind of difficult sticking points around the exhibition, and I felt like I'd find it more interesting to approach them with someone else, and the first person I thought of was James. So yeah, that's kind of how it came about.
Help you out when there's a challenge. James, would you agree with this narrative?
Laura and I mean, we lived
together. A bit faint. Can you come a bit nearer?
Is that better? This is my laptop has spent too long in my shower, so it's full of dust, like full of plaster and full of clay. So I think that's why the microphone's a bit dodgy. I think that, so Laura and I have been friends for a long time, and we briefly lived together, haven't we, Laura? And kind of, like Laura said, I'd been involved more as like a fabricator working with Laura, although that process had kind of started off quite sort of strictly defined, as in, would I glaze some pots for Laura for a show? And then it became quite poetic, didn't it, Laura? So you were giving me sort of haiku and saying, just go wild, just do what you want with this. So that there was kind of introducing more creative freedom from my point of view, working on Laura's work. So it felt like our kind of collaboration stepped up. And I think Laura is much more worth much more used to working with other people as part of their practice, like an intrinsic part of your practice, Laura. Whereas I think I'm used to working with other people as a fabricator. So that maybe working together offered me like a way of collaborating in a different way from how I was used to. Yeah. Which felt really exciting. Yeah.
So this is an exhibition that was took place in 2018, so fairly recently. So Laura, this is in Greenwich in London. So Laura got this, and at this point you thought, actually, here's a kind of blank canvas, and you could invite James to come along and have this kind of time of experimentation and kind of take on new challenges. Did you feel that kind of liberated both your practices to kind of come together? What was the, because someone could argue that actually this could just be my solo show, but this shared responsibility can be quite attractive. Was that the feeling?
Yeah, I think it was more, for me, it was the sort of initial impetus was that I didn't want to experience it on my own, I think. And it's hard to say, to sort of list all the things that made me feel that, or where I was in that time in my practice or personal life, but it just, I wanted to work with someone, and I'd wanted to work with James for a long time. And, you know, like James said, the fabrication, it was becoming more and more trusting him and giving him more freedom, to the point, you know, there is a sort of blurry area between like when something's fabricated and how much creative input someone has and what their intent is and how comfortable they are, you know, and how comfortable you are and who's the author and all that stuff, which I'm interested in. But for this, I just really wanted to experience it with someone else, and luckily James was happy to. So yeah, and when you're in it, it's very liberating and it's very freeing, and you just approach things differently because you have to, because I think the thing what I find about collaborating is that you have to work at a different pace, so things can't percolate in the same way that they might do in your own studio, which I kind of like, and I think brings about quite a lot of surprises and a different kind of energy, which is
sorry, Laura.
No, it's all right.
I was just going to say, right from the start, I think that we established like what was fun for us about working together, because even doing the proposal, we both kind of spurred each other on, didn't we, to make something that would be, I think the emphasis in our proposal to the gallery was definitely what would be fun for us to work on together, perhaps as much as what would make a good show, I think.
See, let's just go, because there was a time when you were able to eavesdrop very closely on each other's work, when you both showed 2015 at Tramway in Glasgow. Maybe, Helen, we can just have those images so we can just get a sense of both your works, because I think this sounds kind of a brilliant opportunity. So this is the big space at Tramway. So this is an exhibition by just Laura called California Now.
Wow. California.
Wow. Sorry. Sorry. Wow. Sorry, it's my glasses. Sorry. No, wow. So this is a vast space in Glasgow, and then maybe if you just move on to James's. Oh yes. So this is and then this is a smaller space at Tramway where James had his show entitled "At Every Fading of the Stars." So you can immediately see, it's very interesting to see these kind of images back to back, how very different your practice is. And then maybe now if we go on to the now show, in direct sunlight. I know we've got to hop around a bit, Helen, sorry, thank you. There. So this is the kind of amalgamation of your ideas and your energy and your sense of kind of exploration with material. So maybe you can just say, those two shows in 2015, and you've come together to collaborate, and maybe talk a little bit about the idea of the kind of, you're starting to think about as bad furniture is about function as well as form. So maybe you can just.
Well, we gave ourselves, we thought it would be fun to kind of imagine ourselves as a sort of formal duo or formal collaborators with this idea of bad furniture as our sort of company name, I suppose, thinking about how we were both interested in and I think at the time, but still interested in useful objects or like domestic objects, and the idea that we are artists as perhaps more than designers, so that we are approaching perhaps a sort of a design brief in maybe a different way or with slightly different criteria than something based on quite functional, rigid values. So I think that's what got us started with Bad Furniture, which hopefully the name also gave us some kind of leeway to make some fun.
And was that name, having the name Bad Furniture, was that the sense that you were giving yourself the kind of the license, the permission to succeed and not necessarily fail, but that you weren't caught up into kind of rigid sense of having to produce good furniture?
What do you think, Laura?
Yeah, I think it was, I mean, it's I think it was always said with sort of tongue in cheek, it's kind of meant to be funny. It's fun. Like when neither one of us are furniture makers or want to be, it's more about sort of, I think for me, like James said, it's about usability, or like connecting with someone, looking at your work in a very different way. But yeah, I think it was almost to maybe, for me anyway, I feel like it sets our intention a bit clearer, that it's not about, you know, necessarily well designed or high functioning. It's more about the sort of the impulse, or the kind of the an attitude, or an approach, I guess, or an attempt, like trying. It's about trying.
Laura's going slightly in and out of. So, sorry, Laura, we just lost you then, or maybe it was just me. Can you just say that last sentence again?
It was more about an attitude and an approach, and a kind of you know, attempting things rather than, you know, trying. I think like an endeavor, like a sort of a creative endeavor.
Seems to me that what's exciting, when you can step away from your own identity as a practitioner and step into another realm where you can be more experimental, risk. That was the sense that being able to kind of inhabit a new identity, or part-time identity, is Bad Furniture.
I think like I said about even thinking about proposing this, putting in a proposal for this show, it felt like we were already kind of stating our intent a bit, in that we wanted to make things that were enjoyable to make. It was as much about the process of being in the studio together and learning from each other and pushing each other, or like sort of daring each other maybe a little bit, which is what I certainly felt Laura gave me permission to think of or propose objects or materials or kind of ways of working that I wouldn't normally feel were sort of available to me as someone that's quite based in a material, based in ceramics. So I think there was that sense of daring each other to do something that was maybe slightly one step beyond, or one step different from how we would normally work in our own practices.
And you've talked as well about the sense of a community for the work, people coming in and being given plants. That seems to be, as you said, James, Laura's practice very much is about a kind of community and about a generosity of the gift and giving and involving. With this collaboration.
Sorry, recap that last bit, Susanna, we lost you.
Is this something that's opened up for you with your collaboration with Laura? This idea of, you gave away plants, it was a sense of the kind of community coming in, the sense of the exhibition being quite porous with the visitors, that there was a kind of coming and going and a more greater interaction with the work, perhaps.
Well, I think it's inspiring to, maybe I'd like to know actually, Laura, whether you think it was inspiring, but the idea of having objects that were there, that people were supposed to touch and were supposed to kind of make dirty by making, the idea was that visitors to the studio would get a chance to make their own little plant pot and plant a seed and take away either their seed in a little plant pot and or one of their plants that have been left by other previous visitors that were growing. You can see in this picture here kind of different stages of growth, so that you could kind of stock your own garden, bring a little bit of garden to your own life. I think the idea of touching and using things, felt like that's sort of forbidden often in artworks, even if they're made with materials like Laura and I are so used to working with, like fabric and ceramic, that are kind of so linked with intimacy in our daily lives through functional objects anyway. So
is that what you both found? I think apparently it's me that's breaking up a little bit. My connection's not very good, so sorry, blaming everybody else's connections. I think it might be my connection. But did you find this idea that the kind of the touch and working with ceramic, was that kind of the intimacy that the visitors could have? Was that something that was kind of new to you, James?
It was new to me, making stuff right from the start that was intended to be useful. I think I've skirted around things that were kind of sculptures of useful things, maybe, or interested in what implying a use onto an artwork, how that can make you view it differently. But I don't know whether, Laura, your practice has been broader anyway, hasn't it, to involve sort of clothing, and I was just thinking about other things that you're making useful things already alongside or included in the sculptures that you make.
Yeah, but it's right. I don't tend to make things, despite making quite tactile work. I'm more sort of interested in it being visually tactile, I think, than actually, you know, being grabbed and pulled about. I think this exhibition was quite, I guess, quite different in that we wanted people to move through the space in quite a different way, and that meant really handling things and sitting on things. And you know, a plinth was a workbench, and the fountain was where you got your water to plant your seed, and
the bits of fabric were like curtains that you could actually kind of separated the space, but also that you can walk through and view from different sides. And yeah. So
do you think this kind of coming together, this sense of adventure, this joint adventure, and I think I said to you the other day when Picasso and Braque started collaborating on cubism, they talked about each other being on a kind of rock climbers together on a kind of rope, and that the other one gave ballast while the other one went up a step, or wouldn't quite like think of the rock climbing, but is that what you feel, that sense of joint responsibility, but also that kind of joint, to be more adventurous? Do you feel that's it, that with materials, with the approach to how the audience will touch the work, so you feel you can stepping into new territory? Is that?
Yeah, it's like you can approach your practice from the side in a different way, or sort of sidestep out of what you normally do. Or I think from the start, like James, you were very clear that for you it was like, I'm going to teach you ceramics, you're going to teach me fabric. It was quite there's going to be an exchange, and quite a direct one, and then we did in a way, like sort of very sort of holistically. It just, that's how it happened. You kind of absorbed each other's. So it was almost like James assisted me with the fabric things and I assisted him with the ceramic things, and then suddenly we kind of meshed and you're kind of more equal, which was I really enjoyed. But yeah, I think you have a different kind of confidence when you're working with someone else, and the sort of maybe anxieties you might normally have, you don't have time to have, because, you know, when you're deciding what color like we talked about, what color the big metal arch support structure should be, and that would have taken me weeks.
Okay, so the tyranny of choice, the tyranny of making decisions.
I think because we don't collaborate. I think it's a different thing if you collaborate on a regular basis. If you're a kind of artist duo, you know, that's you're in the studio together, you make work together. Where, you know, I think while we were doing this show, we both had other shows to do. I think James was teaching abroad. I was, you know, I do my workshops and teaching, and so we had to be quite economic with the time we had together. So there was no time to procrastinate, or there was no time to there's not time to get things wrong, but I think you just have to move through the work.
The momentum of another. So maybe we should just move on, because I suppose I have known Laura's work for a number of years, and I was just thinking your project up at Hospital Field. I remember coming to that when you were, I mean, again, I was still thinking, because you actually dug a kind of fire pit, didn't you?
Oh yeah.
So I've kind of known your work, and then I've known James' work I think I first saw your work, I saw the tramway shows, I saw both your work, but then for the second edition of Design Exhibition Scotland, so that's 2019, I was interested in drinking fountains, this idea of that once upon a time, when you think of the Victorian drinking fountains of McFarlane, the big Glasgow foundry, these wonderfully elaborate, not shy and demure, but these wonderful colourful, vibrant celebration of kind of free and clean drinking water. So I approached James, and then at kind of same time I was kind of aware that bad furniture had come into being. So it was around the time I think we started speaking when the exhibition In Direct Sunlight was on in London. So here are the two fountains. So these are from 2019 at Design Exhibition Scotland. And part of they were shown alongside a drinking fountain by Tanya Kovacs, who worked in ceramic. And Design Exhibition Scotland has since gone on to work with Mural of Glasgow on another kind of pop-up drinking fountain. So it's something, as you can tell, I'm quite passionate about. But maybe you can talk now a little bit about the approach to this, because it was a commission, how you approach, but there was quite a tight brief which I gave you. And obviously, if anything has to function, it's a drinking fountain. I should say these are prototypes, but can you just talk a little bit about what shaped the forms that we have here?
I think it's important to say they're working prototypes. I think that was our biggest headache, was if you press that button, that you can't see, but behind it there's a whole structure of that. We wanted to make that quite visible, and the big water buck on the top, and
it's like stepping behind the scenes, isn't it? But the idea was at the front of the fountain you can see this amazing, both of them have got kind of watery images on, and these ceramic dispensing points, and then when you step around the back, this one in particular, you can see the metal frame and the ballast, the pebbles that are holding it up. This felt like, I mean, the tighter brief and trying to set ourselves the challenge of making something that worked was quite tricky, wasn't it, Laura, at times?
Yeah, it was a real headache.
It was, because we had to do lots of research into something that we didn't necessarily know anything about to start with. But I think, I mean, I feel like both fountains are quite clear kind of diagrams of how we were thinking about the objects. So the idea of trying to think about how we want the feeling of the object. So the idea of having something that was super visible and brightly coloured and kind of celebratory and like a big presence on wherever you might encounter it. So that having these like bright colours and like a big kind of billboard almost that was directing you towards the water fountain, rather than something kind of polite and quiet and like hid away in the corner next to the toilets.
Well, they're quite perfunctory, all the ones that are appearing now, aren't there? There's one near Queen's Park and it's just a blue tube, which is fine, but I think we like the idea of, that every high street could have a different image or colour or material behind it, and that they'd be sort of, it wouldn't be a fountain, it'd be the fountain kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I like, where fountains, where you say, I'll meet you by the fountain.
Yeah.
That sense as a beacon in the kind of urban realm, and a place of congregation, and a place of kind of water and quenching a thirst.
And that you'd have affection for that, I think, rather than it being like these sort of stainless steel ones you get. And like this one has a dog, the pink loop at the bottom is the dog fountain, that there would be a kind of a spot for an animal as well as a human. Yeah,
which were sort of inspired as well by all those Victorian cast iron ones that had like horse drinking troughs and dog drinking bowls and all the rest of it connected.
Exactly, because actually the fountain here in Edinburgh, what's it called, the little dog fountain, that was originally a fountain with a little dog trough at the bottom as well. So that whole idea, so did you, being that this was a commission for a specific work, how did that conversation, as much as it was challenging, how did those decisions land, being that it was two objects opposed to an exhibition? Obviously the design exhibition was a group exhibition. How did you consider that? How did that process of working together on a second collaboration unfold for you?
It was different, because it was I found it really hard to get started with this. I don't know about you. I feel like it took us a really long time to hit on something.
I think that one of the things that has happened with these collaborations we've done is, I think it's brought out the fact that I have a possibly sort of misplaced confidence in being able to make something work in terms of technically, and Laura has absolute confidence in sort of that it will work visually, or that I don't even know whether you mind how it works visually, but just like, well, that's what it's going to be. Like, don't be afraid of what this object is going to look like. And whereas I think
why you're so good that you have a confidence that it will work, and Laura has confidence that visually it will kind of come.
Well, I just think particularly with this one that was so kind of dependent on us getting it to work. I think that was the bit that Laura, particularly you, found really stressful at the start, wasn't it? Was the idea of, well, how do we even start figuring out how this thing is going to work and what the restrictions might be, and what kind of like how we might box ourselves in somehow by trying to make it work, and the limitation. Yeah, I think that was quite a complicated thing to figure out.
Yeah, and the idea of like the form following the function, like we had to, what came first? It was really hard to work out what came first, or if they happened alongside each other, or.
Which is why it ended up being they ended up being, particularly the one indoors that has the metal frame because it's freestanding, became so sort of diagrammatical, didn't they? Because so that one, Laura, yeah. So around the back, that we said, like I said earlier, if you walk around the back, there's the powder coated steel frame with the ballast at the bottom, which is just a load of pebbles, like a few bags of pebbles in there to weight it so that it doesn't fall over. And then there's a plastic water butt up high at the top of the steel frame, which is where the water is getting dispensed from to go through the little button there. And so it all feels like actually a series of the conversation that we had with our sketchbook. One of us was exactly that, really, wasn't it? Like, how are we going to get the water? It's going to have to be in a barrel. It's going to have to be up the top for the gravity, and then that kind of that informed the design, I suppose, which is, I guess, made it quite honest in a way, given that it looks quite theatrical. But
that's what I like, because essentially they, that sense of theatre, but then the sense of the reveal behind. Basically, a drinking fountain is just a source of clean water and something, and now often fountains, even electrical, have all sorts of things that are, going on, or have a chilling device, or but essentially if water comes out of the tap, it tends to be cold once you've run it for a little bit. But I love this simplicity of taking something is complicated, but actually you don't need to overcomplicate it. And I think what is more important is that sense of beacon and welcome and a set place to kind of congregate. Maybe just go back to the one outside, Helen. This one gave me challenges, I must say, because I don't think you can see there's a pipe at the bottom, the black pipe just next to the dog trough, and that is a hose pipe that led down the side of Line and Turnbull, in through the window to a tap. And gosh, that was quite a challenge. And of course, then you think actually water does have that ability, once you put a tap on, that the pressure does take it up. So they both work beautifully.
This was a really nice site to work with, which I really love in my own work, when you get an opportunity to work with a nice bit of architecture. And this is, so on the front of that stonework, you can see forms a kind of column on the front of this grand neoclassical form, a chapel at the end of a nice straight vista in Edinburgh. So kind of classic architectural devices going on. And so it felt like a really lovely opportunity to stick something in that was purposefully shouty and unexpected and intriguing, so that you could see it even from the end of the street. You could see this like flash of color. So in some ways, like even that came almost before the imagery. So the idea of, well, it's going to be bright and colorful and eye-catching and glossy as well, like liquidy surface, which you can't necessarily see in these photos. Yeah.
No, because maybe we should just talk now about your work, James. It is that you often like to puncture pomposity. You often take kind of architectural forms, Corinthian columns, dados, all those kind of architectural features of kind of smack of refinement and the decorative and the lush and sometimes the decadent, but you take those and often amplify, make them bigger or bring them down to the floor, so in a sense of scale that we can walk amongst them. So maybe, so for this, you were just talking about the kind of architectural language that you kind of listen out for. How is this different for you, doing something you still consider the building, obviously, the kind of, that in fact it's a classical building. Have you noticed that your own practice has changed since making that work, that you're thinking about how you punch of pomposity?
Well, I think actually the experience of working on functional things is the bit that's been probably brewing away, which sort of is what was behind the conversations with me and Laura anyway, thinking about making things that were functional, had a use or had a kind of value beyond purely a sculptural one, and maybe also thinking about the afterlife of the objects we were making, because we both have studios that are full of work that has been shown and has come back and doesn't necessarily have a home to go to. And there's something sort of heartbreaking, but also sort of unsustainable about that, I think. So thinking about how you could maybe start thinking about work that either has a sort of function built in right from the start, or that maybe it could have a second life or an afterlife with another purpose that becomes functional somehow, as a way of sort of perhaps spuriously justifying my making of it in a world that's full of objects. But I think that's something that I've become more and more interested in, and that's like the work I'd be working on in the studio right now is all kind of rooted in function, which
and
is...
Are they going to be functional objects, or
Yeah.
James,
Yeah.
they are functional objects?
Yeah.
We were talking when we rehearsed the other day about furniture, and I always think a chair is a sculpture until you sit on it, and then it becomes a chair, and then it becomes a functional thing. So, Laura, do you feel the same? Do you feel your practice is making, I know you do make functional objects, do you feel again, since making the fountains, that you, in the sense of why put another thing in the world, it should be a functioning form?
Yeah, I think on a bad day, like Jane says, when you look in your studio and you've got all these things and you trip over boxes and other I think I can't add something more. And I think when lockdown started, I had that feeling intensely that I couldn't think to make. It was quite strange. It's sort of hard to remember it now, but I just couldn't make anything. I didn't want to make anything, and I didn't want to. And I'd been working on a show for Glasgow International, and I just couldn't keep going with it. And someone I close had died, and I felt like I sort of just wanted to make something for them or thinking of them, and so I just started making pots. It's that kind of simple. And I think I've done that in the past when I'm stuck. I know when I started on the MFA and we were given a drawing project, and I was horrified that I was on an MFA and I was being given a project. I was so cross. So I think I made baskets out of paper. Like I'd rather be doing something than be stuck. So I think I started very much sort of start of lockdown last year making pots, and quite big ones. There's some, I can get one down.
Yeah, that's...
Oh, I got that's kind of small now. But
yeah, you've got bigger than that, Laura.
Making all kinds of pots.
I know that went back too quickly. Bring it. Sorry, we didn't.
There's another one.
Yeah. Wow. So just talk us through that. Let's see. Gosh, so what is it? What glaze?
That's like an iron ore, so it's no glaze really, and then that's like a transparent glaze, and that's Nirakomi, where you put the stain in the clay and then make these kind of layers, so it's almost like sort of rock-like or fossil-like, and then just enjoying.
No, Laura, you're taking it away too quickly. What's the interior?
Heavy.
Yes, yeah, I like it. What's the interior? Just turn it.
Oh, it's just yellow.
Okay, yes, I can
see. I need a torch, but I've started now. I'm making. You can see these ones.
Get the big ones going.
Hang on.
Yes.
Laura and I have had so many conversations about the importance of
really big
being enjoyable. Look at that.
Wow.
So I'll give you an idea of scale.
And are these for a particular exhibition, or just you exploring and making?
They are well, I've got things I'm working towards, but I wouldn't say they're specifically. There's a really big one I'm quite happy with down here.
Well, let's thank you, Laura.
It's all right.
Working, making.
So that became a pot.
Wow.
So it was gonna. I should be careful. It was gonna be just a. I never know what they're gonna be. I literally just start with a blob of clay.
You're taking this away too quickly. I'm curious and nosy. I'm sure everybody else is. So just go back. So this is an urn with a lid.
Well, the sort of person that passed away at the start of lockdown, I thought that I would make an urn, and I tried to make them and I just kept scrapping them. They were sort of small, and then she was kind of quite an amazing person, so suddenly this big thing I was making felt like it was the right thing, which is nice. Like, I'm in the past, I've always made work for shows. I've always had something to work towards, and if I don't have something to work towards, I tell myself I can't make things, or I don't want to. Whereas that's changed quite a lot for me in the last year. I'd say that I'm just trying to just enjoy making and not making for things, not making for the sake of, well, it is making for the sake of making, but not.
But the starting point,
enjoying the studio making, and then from that I can make a show, like not sort of design. I think in the past I felt like I was designing exhibitions, and I never used to work like that. It's just sort of something that had come about, and I'd found myself working with fabricators more than I think I wanted to. And actually I had a really good sort of studio talk visit with Claire Barkley and Lauren Galt, who are kind of artists that are in the same building as James, but I was at a real sort of stuck point, and they both sort of said, you know, we enjoy your work more when you make it, like, where that's, you know, where's that gone? And sometimes it's hard to know why things happen in your practice. It can kind of have a mind of its own, and you suddenly look around and think, oh yeah, hang on, I've lost. And then sort of doing that show with James, kind of being really hands-on with plaster and clay and physically, you know, we made everything in that, so the massive arches, which had to have sort of a more engineered, you know, it just, I feel like when I work with fabricators, a big chunk of my thinking's missing. And or part of how the work might develop doesn't happen because you didn't allow for that space. So I've sort of been slowly clawing that back, I think.
And do you think that obviously your friend's death and that sadness, but the sense of lockdown, that what I've thought about is that, you know, what's close to hand and what's underfoot, and that simply you have to rely on yourself, and fabricators are closed.
Yeah.
So actually that regaining that intimacy with the materials, and not having to supply a demand of an exhibition venue or a curator has actually been quite, once one kind of reorientates, it's been quite liberating, would you say?
Oh yeah, definitely. And just also thinking about kind of all the sort of workshop scenarios I'm in and the advice I give to people, or the things I enjoy in other people's work, I kind of wasn't allowing myself, I think. So I think lockdown's been quite a good, it kind of suddenly made me not care in a good way, in a kind of, well, all those pressures were mine, all those neuroses or anxieties came from me, and that actually if you can kind of let go of that, it's quite useful. It's quite useful for making work and not wasting time worrying about things that, you know.
One of the things that when we were working together, I think we ended up almost having, like, they turned into sort of therapy sessions, didn't they, Laura? That sounds heavy, but like the idea of the chatting while you're making, when your hands are busy, sometimes you can sort of make breakthroughs, which is maybe almost similar to the sort of leaps that sounds like you have made sort of in that lockdown period where the pressure is off. The idea of thinking about how, I know from my point of view, how I've got into making art because I loved the making of the artworks, and how easy it can be, or weirdly, strangely easy it can be to lose that. And suddenly you're making work that you're not enjoying the process of making, or maybe like, or you're not enjoying the outcome, or something which feels like if you're not getting, it's not sparking joy while you're doing it, that might be a really important criteria that you're missing. And that certainly was true for me. And it sounds like for you, Laura, as well, with your ceramics, you're definitely like getting into it and enjoying the doing.
And James, do you want to show you've got some pieces? James has set up a little.
Yeah. So the reason I'm not in my studio is because I have bedtime duty sort of after we finish this, and there wasn't quite time for the commute back. So I've got like a funny little collection of show and tell objects over here. So there's the bench from Tramway, which is one of those pieces. In fact, the bench and the little kind of.
Do you want to go to the point so we can see what you're.
So this guy and this guy, both from that Tramway show that was at the same time as Laura. And they've joined the ranks of objects that are like, I really like, and I'm surprised that no one else has wanted. Like that's like the criteria of then what comes back to the house, because other things I really like them. And then some, yeah, this is the sort of stuff that I've been working on just recently. So more lighting, thinking about the evolution of functional stuff. So having been asked to produce some lighting last year, and lighting sort of feels almost like the easiest bit of design object you can do, because to a certain extent it's a sculpture with a light bulb stuck on if you want it to be, or like a candle stuck in it. But that was the first time that someone's asked me to make something specifically functional.
Well, so this is the kind of lighting sconce.
Yeah, there's one for some work, a big sconce for House of Voltaire in London, and then some lighting for the Future Perfect, which is a sort of design gallery in the States. And so this year I've been asked by other people to make kind of versions of that work, I suppose. So it's the first time that I've got to revisit some work that was new to me in the first place.
And it was that pleasing to feel that, as you say, you like something, you kind of share it with the world, and you wanted somebody to actually come back and say, actually, we want that too. Is that?
Yeah, it is pleasing, yeah. And also particularly because I think, I don't know, I think I've probably got hang-ups about the line between different fields of craft and design and art, and whether you're allowed to stray across them. And Susanna, it's your phrase about right to roam, and like whether you can wander across these fields. And I think I've sort of absorbed some weird hang-ups from perhaps doing a craft degree and coming from sort of ceramics background, which is quite important to know some of the rules if you want to be able to take any kind of control over what you can make. And maybe that sometimes can feel a bit tyrannical. So the idea of finding ways that allow you to step outside of that, or to like tentatively move into other fields that feel almost like they're not mine. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to be there. I'm not sure what other people will think of that. So that's been nice when someone gives you positive feedback and asks you to do it again. Yeah.
And maybe just say about that. So that's going to be ceramic. Will it be gilded? What have you?
So this guy, yeah, I mean, this is a plaster model at the moment. So that's like a revised. They asked for something. They asked for something smaller than the one they made before, and I thought I was doing it smaller, and it is smaller, but it's still sort of 50 centimeters across or something. But yeah, so this is part of objects that will be slip cast with lighting in, wall mounted, and I've done a lot of metal leaf recently, in the last sort of 3 years, I suppose, as a surface on the ceramics, which is why I've got.
Yeah, bring that to the camera. Yeah.
That guy.
What's that?
I mean, it's just, I mean, it sounds like a really, sometimes where a discovery can be really exciting for you, but when you try and describe it or share it with someone else, you realize it sounds really like nothing. But this is oxidized silver leaf onto black stained ceramic.
Oh, nice.
Just as a contrast to having done lots of stuff with gold and looking
that's
for something.
Gold leaf there. That's a gold.
Imitation gold leaf, yeah, which is super cheap and cheerful. And the idea of it's really nice when you can think about how a different surface on an object, given that ceramics objects, as Laura knows from building those enormous things in the studio, can be so slow to build and to dry and to finish. And I think the idea that you can then totally change the feel of an object, or the impact of an object, or the atmosphere of it by what surface you put on. So,
with the oxide silver, where do you hope to take that? Because I like that. It's like a pewter. It almost looks
like pewter or lead or something like that. And it just feels kind of gloomy and quite Glasgow in that sort of vibe to it. So I think the thought of applying some of that to the quite sort of cartoony shapes that I've been making in the studio, like this is a shelf. That's going to be like a little bracket on the wall.
And can't quite see, is that glazed or what?
No, so this has just been through the kiln once. So this is bisque fired. So it's ready for metal leafing. But the idea of that in gold being like ridiculous and super kitsch, and then whether if that was in another material like that silver leaf, it might have a totally different feel.
And I'm curious about the other two, the black and white. What's that?
This little guy, that guy.
On the floor, yes.
Oh, this is just so my lockdown experience was at home a lot. Oh, sorry, I didn't point that to you. There you go.
Maybe, sorry, as you there, James, just talk about the capital, the pink capital.
This guy.
Yes. Just,
yeah, it's quite an old piece of work now. It's a slip cast object. And as you sort of said earlier, I'm really interested in bits of architecture and architectural sort of fragments, and the idea of, particularly at the moment, this sort of the thought of like Saint Jerome in the wilderness, making his home out of kind of ruins. You've got those beautiful like medieval and kind of Renaissance paintings of Saint Jerome in amongst ruined bits of Roman antiquity in a desert, making his desk off like a slab of stone and like little candles stuck in the foot of a statue or something like that. So that idea of grand architecture recycled as something humble. So this was supposed to be just like a little side table, and it's got a nice peachy, like California.
Yeah, I love that colour.
Place. But this just came from lockdown, spending time here, because I wasn't allowed in the studio for quite a while, and then with childcare and things, not being able to get there as often as I want. So I did a lot of drawing and 2D work in this room, actually, and think in black and white, sort of graphically pictures. I don't know if Helen's got one, but yeah, there you go. So just lots and lots of this, which is loads of kind of signs or symbols, a different scale. And then this is just my little attempt at what happens when you start applying that to, this is just onto plaster. But I think that's what I'm working on at the moment. So
well, can you maybe pick it up? Is it?
It's just a bit of plaster that I use as a model for something, and this is painted on just to see what it feels like. But the idea of this being black, like black ceramic enamel that you fire onto a white glazed surface or something like that. So you could have super simple forms, and depending on what graphic you put on the outside, you could conjure them up into different, like radically different types of objects. So this is sort of like a capital as well, I suppose, like a kind of Corinthian column.
And do you feel like, Laura, that the enforced lockdown has kind of reorientated your practice, both the idea of doing things that give pleasure and the joy of making, the joy of using your hands, but also looking at this kind of going back literally to the drawing board?
Yeah, I do actually, a little bit. I mean, it's a massive privilege to be able to have the time to do that. But I think it's just something, I'm always shocked at how easy it is to lose track of the bit of making stuff that got you into it in the first place. I suppose it's the danger of kind of essentially making like your hobby into your career or something, that it can just become really serious. And like Laura, I've not heard Laura, you describe that idea of designing an exhibition, but that totally rings a bell with me. That really chimes, yeah. So the idea of having time to do stuff that didn't have anywhere to go, and I had to step outside how I'd normally work and where I'd normally work, and that felt quite creative with hindsight, not necessarily at the time.
And it's 25 past now, so we'll kind of round up our conversation and open it up to the floor, the Zoom floor. So people do put comments in the chat or put your hand up, and Helen will find you. But what next for the bad furniture? What's come out of that with lockdown? Do you feel that that's any projects on the horizon?
I think we're both quite focused at the moment on improving our sort of studio environment, and we're quite keen to we're in separate buildings at the moment. James is around the corner at the sculpture studios and I'm sort of a 5-minute walk away. And we've talked about finding another building independently for a long time, but we're kind of, with another artist, Nick Evans, we're sort of developing at the moment a sort of, it's quite progressive really, like a kind of just a different way of occupying a studio building. Don't know how to describe it. We felt like, sorry, go on. No, you go.
I was just going to say, we felt like our studios, or the models of studios that we both occupy, don't really necessarily apply to how we find ourselves being artists.
Yeah. I think I need space. Like at the moment, it's quite logistically difficult to be making ceramics in the same space that you're handling textiles. I'm forever mopping the floor and forever it's just difficult, and I really benefit from I've got another artist below me, Nick Evans, and I'm in and out of his studio. He very kindly lets me do really messy things in his studio occasionally I'll whip round to James's studio, and I think we both have this desire to have a kind of communal studio for, you know, production or making, and just to be in proximity to each other, to have those conversations over clay, or to help each other move things about. Like I have that with Nick here, but we're both sort of keen to formalize that more in a different space. And the idea is that we're kind of trying to talk someone into giving us a building for free in exchange for, well, it's not for free, exchanging our kind of sort of the things that happen, that we all have happening around our practices. So say I do workshops, James teaches, Nick does different things. And what if that, rather than outreach, what if we kind of had inreach and everything came to us, and, you know, we could have a studio for different, you know, groups nearby, or for a recent graduate, or for I don't know, it could be anything, but keeping it quite small, but just really benefiting from the kind of more porous studio environment, I think. Because I think the sculpture studios is fine, but it's a much bigger thing, and there's not so much space for sort of improvising and playing. I need a workshop to play in. I don't need a workshop to book a table. Like I need space to kind of try things and experiment with things. And
like, we've got the sites on. Sorry, James, go on.
I was going to say the strangeness of us all going out to do our art work with other people outside of our studios, whether that's teaching or going elsewhere to do evening classes, or Laura's work with ArtLink, and Nick's work with refugee dads, and all this stuff that happens outside and feels sort of like we drop into a space, do this thing, and it sort of feels detached from everyone's normal life, and we feel like it's totally detached from our studio life.
Yeah,
have a space where those things could happen alongside us and other people working on their practice, so that it sort of, I don't know, provides like a real context for us, what we're doing, and other people for what they'd be doing alongside us. And it felt like something that might be more kind of nourishing and generous and kind of outward looking. I'm really aware at the moment my studio just is literally locked away in a big building surrounded by a car park moat, and it has many great things about it, but it feels like what I'm doing and where I'm working is totally detached from like the rest of the world, and that feels like a shame. So it'd be great to have somewhere that felt like it was more rooted in what's going on elsewhere.
And any sites on any buildings?
Not yet. We've not convinced some. It's about security. Like Grey Wolf is great, but we don't have a sort of secure tenancy. We don't have a long lease. We don't have, you know, the landlord is quite slippery. So, you know, it's thinking about long term and sort of, just trying to think of the future, I guess. And obviously during lockdown, it seemed like a good time to start thinking about that. I think something we've talked about for a long time, but it's never something we've actually put our heads together. But we're partnering with Create on it, which is great to have their sort of input and support. And it's a sort of commissioning agency. They commissioned the Baltic Street Playground in the East End of Glasgow, and they've done all kinds of things. But it's quite sort of, I guess, thinking of public art more as a sort of social, you know, engagement rather than a, you know, bronze statues, I think. So it's good to have them on board. But yeah, we've got quite far with our thinking. It's just building. Yeah. But at the moment, there's lots of empty buildings, but the likelihood of someone committing to like a 20-year lease on those empty buildings is quite unlikely. So
I think this last year has just made probably everyone so aware of what the social contact that they need, as opposed to maybe the social contact that we have now or that we used to get. And that idea of actually, I think Laura and I have both missed, particularly me at the moment, because I think my working life is much more kind of solitary perhaps than Laura's, but really miss other people's contact around, and people whose opinion you trust and value, and whose work you admire, or whose way of working you admire, or whose way of working you are incredulous about, but is really sort of inspiring because it reminds you can do things totally differently like that. The inspiration that other people can provide, I think I've really missed that. So trying to think of a way that could be right at the heart of the studio model seems really exciting. Yeah.
Well, that's brilliant. optimistic note or kind of realization that that's what we've, I think, all been aching for. I just wondered, it just past 6:30, if, I'm more behind, 7:30. Anybody, any questions? Anybody want to make a comment or put their hand up? Or no, they're all out there, being nobody. But do you feel that there's something the two of you want to work on together? Is there anything there, just, you know, without having to design an exhibition? Is there anything that you're kind of particularly thinking, goodness, we'd love to do that together? Is there anything?
Both, after we made that show together, the seed trays that we made were quite a surprise, and quite, I think, something that we both were. We started picking them up and putting them on the wall and thinking about what they could put with legs, and we always intended to kind of do more together, but it's time. Like, I think most artists these days are time poor. Like, you have to juggle so many things to sort of support your practice, that my studio days are so precious at the moment. So James isn't getting any of them. But these were me, it's like, we see, you know, we're always there for each other in terms of input, like, you know, about what you're doing, but actually carving out some time to make something together, I think, is just a bit difficult at the moment. But I would always like, yeah. But there's trays, you're talking about the ceramic trays, aren't they? They're ceramic. Yeah, and we talked about them being tables. I think the thing about our studio model that we're trying to develop is that it would be kind of, there would be a kind of showroom. So that's my kind of little part, was that I wanted it to be a bit like the Amiga workshop, and that, you know, if someone wanted to make a wardrobe, we could have it in there, or if someone wanted to, you know, that there could be all kinds of, you know, if someone made I don't know, just this quite open sort of a shop essentially. But no, not a shop, a show. I mean, James called it a showroom, and I think that's the idea, that it could be, you know, a way of showing things, a way of selling things, a way of just
trying things out, testing things.
Different emphasis, yeah. And I think it's having an outlet for these things, I think, sometimes, and it's hard to work out where that fits when you're sort of an artist and you work with a gallery, but you don't want to, you know, that stuff's not for them, you know, who's it for, where can
I think that's what and this kind of declaring a kind of right to roam between exhibitions and showrooms and shop windows, of how to bridge that gap. And I think that's the territory I'm very interested in. But maybe I should say, so the question is just, oh, sorry, I just see in the chat, I'm catching the chat here. Somebody's asking with the fountain for design exhibition in Scotland, whether we tend to further develop it. I'm game. I mean, everything has been on slightly pause, but yeah, what's your thinking on taking a working prototype to something that is seen in Dundee waterfront or Paisley, or how would that feel, to being that it was a challenging commission? Do you feel that you would like to?
Yeah, I think we both were keen to make that happen. I think it's all about having a site and some budget to make that happen. I think having a place for it to go, whether that's permanently or kind of semi-permanently or for a few months, and I think that's what's important, to be able to have a place to root it in. But I think that would be excellent, wouldn't it, Laura? That felt like the point. Like we did try to design something that felt reproducible, or a version of it quite easily kind of reproducible.
Yeah, I think we made a structure for ourselves that could, you know, to kick out from, and that you could have different images or different ceramic forms or different, you know, there would be sort of, it was a kind of modular thing, that these things could go together and you could easily kind of transport it to a different city and have a different version or a different, yeah.
No, I mean, before lockdown, I was in conversation with Scottish Water, Edinburgh Airport, and again, all the, you know, talking about the idea that the kind of 19th century fountain is played, and also obviously the plastic bottle, that, you know, that actually water, we're so lucky with my big jug that we have free and clean water, but it's being commodified, and, you know, you pay £1 for something in plastic which you drink in seconds. So I think that's the conversation I want to pick up again. And yes, I know it was Paisley and the new plans for Dundee waterfront. So definitely we'll be rolling out those fountains. I'm just seeing there's another, so this is a question to James. You said that you found a bit of dilemma with the traditional and the contemporary. I have that too as a retired monuments conservator, statues, fountains, or to do, now getting back into actually do ceramics. How do you understand the contemporary and the traditional artisan's mindset? I think that's.
I don't know. I think I feel quite lucky that my degree in Brighton was actually 4 different materials, so wood, metal, ceramics and plastics. So sort of officially only have about a quarter of a degree in ceramics. So in a funny way, I feel like I learned lots of, like a little tiny taste of lots of the rules around ceramics without actually having to get fully kind of inducted into involved in the cult somehow. So I think that's always given me a bit of freedom. And then my time in the architectural ceramics company that Susanna mentioned right at the start, Lambs, that sort of gave me loads of practice with my hands and like honed my skills, but also working with stuff that maybe had different criteria to working with domestic ceramics or something like that. So I suppose artisan mindset, yes, I'm always interested in things that, I suppose I found myself making lots of stuff that doesn't necessarily look like it's super ceramic-y. So that's my sort of escape route from feeling like I could get too bogged down in things. Yeah.
And on that note, James, we're just thinking, what time's bedtime stories?
We've got.
Just hold you back from.
We've got another 7 minutes. We're fine.
So that's okay. So maybe I should at this point. Sorry, now we've just got another one I've just seen coming from Lucy Byatt. I think it's very interesting what you said, Laura, about finding other motivations to make work beyond shows. Do you think you will continue to keep this in mind?
Yes. Yeah, because I feel really positive about being in the studio, which I think I hadn't felt for quite a long time, strangely, and that actually it took lockdown and suddenly I've got quite a different situation to James in that I run the building, so I didn't close it. We're all kind of self-contained and in our own, and you know, it was easy to sort of make it safe quite quickly and to keep working. So really, you know, I felt really lucky to have my studio and to have I mean, I think I started making pots because that was really all I had. I had 10 leftover bags of clay, and I just felt like that's just what made sense to me, was to make something for something. And I just got a kiln, luckily. So I just was good to go, and I'm really enjoying not thinking about shows. And you know, an opportunity might come up like the Stavanger, you know, I was asked to make something specific to go outside in Norway, and that was fine, but it didn't feel, I felt like I approached it in quite a different way and in a much looser and freer way, which I think has come about from this kind of time in the studio, really.
Yeah, here we are. We've got, thanks, Helen. We've got the image. So so what is this on? What fabric? How did you? Maybe
it's a banner. So it's I think they normally I don't know if there's a picture of the sort of bigger context of it, but it's a sort of front entrance to the space. And I think normally they would put, it was like almost like an advertising hoarding. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
For the information about their shows. And I think at this, you know, quite quickly when they realized they couldn't have people in the gallery, that they would commission artists to make an artwork to sort of sit on the front of the building and use this kind of format. And I mean, this is quite an interesting collaboration in that it's about 20 meters by 5 meters. You can't really tell the size of it there, maybe, so it's quite big. But I decided that I wanted it to sort of activate itself somehow. So I wanted to have these sort of homemade wind chimes. And obviously I literally had 2 weeks to make this work. So it was all done through sketches and talking to the technician and kind of giving him instructions, but quite loose ones, quite light instructions, sort of maybe a set of rules. Like I said, he couldn't buy anything and that he had to use things that they had in the storeroom, and that I wanted them to feel, you know, feel homemade, and for him to enjoy making them, which apparently he quite enjoyed. And so those chimes kind of swing about in the wind, and yeah, I guess I guess maybe earlier I talked about the line between, you know, an author or a collaborator, or sort of who makes the work. And I think if I do get things made now, I like giving people a certain degree of wiggle room, or a certain amount of space for them to be creative or to enjoy it, because I think I like trusting people, and I like sort of being surprised by what they might do. And the guy, I think you can see the one right at the back is made out of old thermos flasks that he found at the back of his workshop. That's old copper pipe, that one. But yeah, that I think I approached that work in a very differently, and I think I definitely will keep going as I am at the moment, because I'm really enjoying it and it feels really productive. And like I say, the sort of I don't put the sort of any restrictions on the people I do workshops with, and so I don't quite know. It's a bit like James saying he doesn't quite know where he's got these kind of ideas about not being able to, because I always think of James as a sculptor, and I don't know if you do now, James, but you're always so reluctant to say that you're an artist or you're a sculptor, and that there's this sort of strange division between craft and art, and I can't be doing with it. I'm not interested in it. So it's sort of,
has that maybe on the last point been that James has to we all have to go, but do you think this kind of, that you are, it's kind of given you kind of confidence to and also with lockdown, it does seem to, it's done many things for many people. It's been hugely tough and challenging, but there is a sense where one has had to fall back on and actually work out what's vital. And for you, talking about a different form of motivation, do you feel likewise, James, that you're going to be able to remember what you've learned and kind of travel on with that? Because it's all very easy to forget these new.
I hope so. I definitely have felt differently about going back, because with time out of the studio, then I've got the sense of going back, which has felt, I suppose, because I was so grateful to be able to go back and kind of get back to bags of clay and working with some sort of familiar language that I feel quite sort of fluent in, and having not been able to use that language for sort of 6 months or so, I think I feel much more grateful for that long relationship with clay, and the way that I can think through it, which I think I said earlier, like sometimes can feel like a restriction, because sometimes it feels like, well, I'm so fluent in this language that I find it difficult to think outside that, or stray out, or let myself think about an artwork that might not be rooted in something ceramic-y. That sometimes I can feel almost a bit resentful for, like, oh, clay is so takes over my life in such a way, it's so unforgiving. But I think I feel differently about it now, because I feel it's really lovely to get back to that. Yeah, so I hope that I keep that enthusiasm, which is nice, which is why it's inspiring to visit Laura in her studio as well, because you can see there's a lot of the enthusiasm and kind of energy in the making process, which is the bit that can get lost when you feel like you're doing it for someone else, maybe. Yeah, so that's a nice thing to know.
Lovely note to finish off on. So huge thanks to Laura Aldridge and James Rigler, and to kind of Helen Voach in Glasgow, who's vitally comparing us. Oh, sorry, Helen, I didn't introduce you at the beginning, so she's going to come on their shoes. So big thanks as ever to Vital Helen. Thanks for everybody for coming along. The talk has been recorded, so it will be soon up on the website, so do revisit it or tell all your friends about it. Our next studio visit is with Harry Morgan via Zoom on the 18th of March, so do join us then. But huge thanks for all your support, for coming along and listening in. It's very important to us all. But but huge thanks to Laura and James for being so generous and open about how they work and why they work and how they like to work and how they share. And so that huge generosity is much appreciated by us all. So huge thank you. And thank you for everybody for coming along. Have a good evening.